everyone, and welcome to a thing I did. Oh, this has been a week of trying to set up a dedicated reading nook. I actually have a few, but this is going to be the setup for when we read fiction and gay things, you know. We got my young adult fiction here, arranged in rainbow colors, of course. Contemporary and vintage stuff, you know, web novel things here, and some lights, which aren't actually as bright as I thought they would be. I might have to invest in some new lights, but this is where we'll hang out to read in the future. Let me know how it sounds, because I'm testing my microphone in different places. If this is loud enough, let me know. If this is not loud enough, I will move it. Hello Delvin, Akatsuki, Aaron, Lobsel, Pink Cupcakes, Robin, hello. We are reading, Scumbag System, or Scum Villain Self-Saving System today. We finished chapter 20 last week, which was, the ending of a, kind of the beginning of the story. We're about to get into the mid-portion where they're having the Immortal Alliance conference, and things are gonna get real. We have a visitor. Are you are you upset? Come here, baby boy. Bob says, he always sits in my lap during stream. He says, why you no give lap space for Bob? Oh my goodness, he was staring at me like, you didn't give me space for sitting? Oh my goodness. Hey, Surfin. So everybody likes the volume? Good. Awesome. That's convenient for me. Bob, can you sit? You've kicked Sensei out of his spot. I'll put him right there. Sensei can sit right there. Can you sit down? And what is... Oh, that's the tablet. I was like, what is hanging out over there? So we're going to start chapter 21. We're only going to read 2 chapters today because these are pretty long chapters leading up to the first big climax. So brace yourselves, folks. Chapter 21, Immortal Alliance Conference 1. Shen Qingqiu was silent for a long time before he finally tossed the invitation into Ming Fan's arms for him to put away. Luo Binghe was receiving Meng Mo's guidance within the dream realm every day, and progressing at lightning speed. He'd long assumed responsibility of many things. Shen Qingqiu quite happily assigned some of Kangchong Mountain's trivial internal tasks for him to handle. Once he became older, missions with demon elimination or helping others outside the mountain were also tossed to him, so that he wouldn't spend every day wandering around Shen Qingqiu. Though he was being comfortably waited upon, he wasn't sure if this child's growth had gone awry or what, sticking to him a little too strongly. Shen Qingqiu often also self-reflected. Was it because he doted on him too much? Should he appropriately smear himself a little and prove to the system he was firmly a villain? Otherwise, if this kept going, he was afraid when the time came he would be unable to harden his heart and strike Luo Binghe into the endless abyss. However, though he told himself this, every time he finished reflecting, the next time he met Luo Binghe and saw that pure and innocent face, that hard-working figure, Shen Qingqiu would always first praise him out of habit. You finished copying the files? Rescued the people? Found the things? You're done cooking? Well done. After praising, he'd forget his original plans. Oh, poor baby. Ming Fan put the invitation away and saw that his complexion wasn't very good. He thought of how after that stinking brat Luo Binghe went down the mountain, Shizun had endlessly picked at the kitchen's fare, and had not eaten properly at all these days. He asked, Shizun, would you like this disciple to prepare some congee? Shen Qingqiu really had no appetite, and waved him away. No need, you can go. Ming Fan didn't dare say more, and obediently took his leave. His heart flooded with tears. In the last couple of years, that brat, Luo Binghe, had completely become Shizun's favorite. I can't even give Shizun a mouthful of congee! Of course, he didn't consider that perhaps it was an issue with cooking skill. After an unknown length of time, more footsteps approached. Shen Qingqiu said, Didn't I say there was no need? This disciple rushed back a long distance from the outer provinces, and Shizun won't even take a single look at me before refusing? The voice was gentle and clear, and even carried a hint of teasing dismay. Upon hearing it, Shen Qingqiu almost fell to the ground along with his chair. He jerked his head back. A 17-year-old youth, slim and tall and graceful, dressed in white robes, lips upturned upwards in the hint of a smile, was gazing at him with a pair of shining eyes. The long sword on Luo Binghe's back was Zheng Yang, drawn from Wanjian Peak. Its name complemented the current Luo Binghe's temperament well. The blade of the sword glistened with a sacred light. It was also a good, high-quality sword. When Luo Binghe had pulled it free from the rock wall, it had elicited numerous surprised exclamations and praise from sect members. But compared to the Luo Binghe's true personal sword, it wasn't the same level. Shen Qingqiu composed himself. Why have you returned so quickly this time? Luo Binghe sat in a seat next to him and steadily poured a cup of tea, then pushed it towards Shen Qingqiu's hand. It wasn't a difficult-to-handle disaster, and I also missed Shizun terribly, so I rushed back without stopping to rest. These words sounded rather slick and insincere, but since Luo Binghe was the male lead, he always had the ability to make the smoothest of smooth-talking sound matchlessly warm and sincere. On Shen Qingqiu, this was very effective. Shen Qingqiu picked up that cup of tea and took a sip. It was fragrant, snowy mountain tea plundered from Chongding Peak, but he couldn't taste it at all. He said, "The Immortal Alliance Conference is about to begin." Luo Binghe had long known about this and asked, "Do you want this disciple to first draft a list of Qingjing Peak's participating disciples and give it to Shizun to check?" These years, these miscellaneous things, whether big or small, Shen Qingqiu had had all of them tossed to Luo Binghe to deal with. After all, right now, Luo Binghe was so sweet, obedient, easy to use, his work thorough and meticulous. Shen Qingqiu absolutely couldn't think of any reason why he should do them himself. Before making the final decision, Luo Binghe would always conscientiously ask Shen Qingqiu to look it over, to see if there was anything unsound. And Shen Qingqiu always wanted to say, "Actually, you needn't get me to check. Seriously, you are much better at handling affairs than me." Poor babies. You can tell he's getting really melancholy about what's gonna happen. Shen Qingqiu said, "When the drafting is finished, just report directly to Zhangmen Shishong." Luo Binghe nodded. He still wanted to say something, but he sensed something slightly off. Today's Shen Qingqiu seemed to be paying extra attention to him. He couldn't help but smile and ask, "Why does Shizun keep looking at me? Could it be this disciple has been gone for so long, and Shizun also missed this disciple?" Shen Qingqiu said, "I raised you, and I'm not allowed to look." Luo Binghe chortled and said, "Of course Shizun is allowed. Am I pleasing to look at?" Shen Qingqiu shook his head while smiling, considering his next words, and then said, "Binghe." Luo Binghe also realized Shen Qingqiu seemed to have important words to say, and his expression instantly turned serious. "Yes?" Shen Qingqiu stared at his eyes. "Do you want to become stronger? Stronger until you are without rival, until no one beneath the heavens would dare compete with you?" Since a long time ago, Luo Binghe had already possessed an answer to this question. Sitting squarely, without the slightest hesitation, he looked straight back. "Yes!" Seeing him answer so resolutely, Shen Qingqiu released a breath of relief within his heart. He followed up and asked, "Even if before getting there you have to suffer through much pain and torment, experience countless tribulations to the point your body and heart are all about to collapse, you would still want to become the strongest of all?" Luo Binghe slowly said, "Binghe does not fear suffering and tribulations, and only wishes to be strong enough to protect the people and things important to me." After receiving this answer, Shen Qingqiu's thoughts finally settled down a little. "That's right. Luo Binghe, for the sake of protecting your future harem's myriad of jade-like, flower-like beauties, you must become strong." Ah, this dumb fool. His heart was still unwilling, but when he thought that this was something the protagonist had to go through, to break free of his chrysalis and become a butterfly, Shen Qingqiu had no choice but to adjust his mindset. Although he was already adept at brainwashing himself, it wasn't like he'd feel the slightest bit of happiness just because he'd done it so many times. 3 days later, each of Kangchong Mountain's 12 peaks prepared their disciple attendance roster, and all headed to the conference. The convening location of the Immortal Alliance conference this time was a rolling mountain range extending for many miles, with complex terrain named Judi Gorge. People of reputation were conscious of their rank and wouldn't participate in the Immortal Alliance conference to compete with their juniors for limelight. There was no need, and it would be below them. Therefore, the 12 Peak Lords and members of the sane generation would not sign up. The cap on the number of spots was high, naturally the more the better. In the end, the number setting out grandly for Judi Gorge, well-equipped, was actually around 100. This many people flying on their swords would be too high profile and disturb civilians, so they traveled by carriage. A cultivation novel where they sat in carriages and rode horses all day. Shen Qingqiu could never understand why airplanes shooting towards the sky made this kind of setup. But no matter how much it merited Sukomi after doing it for 3 years, he'd still run dry. The current him was numb to it. The majority all chose to ride horses, being heroic and valiant. However, firstly, Shen Qingqiu was not good at riding and didn't want to fall and break his neck. Secondly, he disdained being exposed to the wind, sun, and rain as not comfortable enough, not elegant enough, and so wormed his way into the carriage under a crowd of watchful eyes. Hey, Jeff, welcome. Alright. Someone else had long entered the carriage. On seeing him lift the curtain with his fan and worm inside, she said with contempt, "A big, strong man like you trying to steal my spot." This woman with beautiful eyebrows, a full chest, and her hair piled high was Xianshu Peak's master, Qi Qingqi. In the original work, Qi Qingqi and Shen Qingqiu had no real relationship and very few interactions. However, these years Shen Qingqiu had occasionally worked with her. He found her straightforward and fierce, and got along with her decently well. Shen Qingqiu used his fan to shoo her into giving him room, while saying with perfect composure, "I am a sick patient." Qi Qingqi moved to give him room, and still refused to spare him with her words. Pampered and spoiled. Being this delicate and coddled is totally unlike a core formation stage cultivator. "Do you need someone to serve you snacks later?" Shen Qingqiu suddenly said, "Right, many thanks to Shime for the reminder." While speaking, he rapped on the carriage wall with his fan's guard. A little while later, someone lifted the carriage curtain, and Luo Binghe smiled while asking, "Shizun, snacks, water, or is your waist sore?" A lively and energetic white horse, a handsome and extraordinary youth, with the sun beaming down from above, they seemed to shine before their eyes. Shen Qingqiu said, "Your Qi Shishu would like some snacks." Luo Binghe immediately took out an exquisitely wrapped snack from his torso and offered it to him. Looked like he'd been prepared for this. He said, "If Shizun still has orders, please call for me." Only then did he let down the curtain. Liu Qingge spurred his horse on past them with a powerful and resounding Shen Qingqiu said, "That's natural." He lowered his head and opened the packaging. "Dragon's beard candy, not bad." He turned to pass the snack to Qi Qingqi. "Want some?" Qi Qingqi found it hard to describe her current feeling. She felt that more or less it was indignation. Shen Qingqiu had actually managed to raise a disciple this considerate with such high spiritual strength. In truth, that wasn't the case. She just didn't know there was a phrase that described this feeling. So-called, "flashy it blinded my dog eyes." This is a phrase that means, jaw-dropping, basically. That, Luo Binghe is so good it's jaw-dropping. Alright, let me go. Qi Qingqi refused to look at Shen Qingqiu as he ate the dragon's beard candy. It's still making a final struggle. Even Mingyan is riding a horse. As long as she could make Shen Qingqiu feel a little bit ashamed, she'd win. It just so happened that Shen Qingqiu had nothing to do and looked outside. Indeed, Liu Mingyan had her face covered with a veil, her personal sword, Su Shi, on her back, and sat straight on her horse. A faint breeze blew by, causing the veil to flutter, giving her the appearance of ethereal lightness. This picture was far too pleasing to the eye. Shen Qingqiu couldn't help but look at her for a while, sighing, "Beautiful beyond comprehension." Qi Qingqi made a paw at his face. "Don't look at my beloved disciple with such covetous eyes." This back and forth was heard by the nearby Luo Binghe, and his face immediately turned green. But Shen Qingqiu hadn't noticed his expression at all, and simply started eating while watching her. He had the mindset of someone in a theater before the movie, eating popcorn and drinking cola while waiting for the ads to end and the film to begin. That was Luo Binghe. The male and female leads were in the same venue. How could there not be sparks flying or amorous feelings budding between them? Luo Binghe saw that Shizun was staring straight at Luo Binghe without pause, and his hands holding the reins couldn't help but tighten, the knuckles turning white. Beautiful beyond comprehension. She isn't even showing her entire face. No matter how beautiful, can she be better looking than me? Oh, you little green goblin. Jealous. Luo Binghe really wasn't a narcissist. He'd just always known very well what he looked like. He didn't gleefully revel in it, but he also wouldn't downplay it out of false humility. After a long time, when Shen Qingqiu still had no intention of moving his gaze, Luo Binghe really couldn't stand it anymore. He lightly urged with the whip, and the white horse quickly moved forward, so its bridle was even with Luo Binghe's. Luo Binghe inclined his head and smiled. Greeting. Liu Shime. Luo Binghe started, then gave a shallow nod, returning the greeting. Luo Shishong? Oh, it started! A day where he could see with his own eyes, peerlessly handsome men and beautiful women from a book walk together, bridle to bridle, had come in his lifetime. Shen Qingqiu was secretly excited and couldn't resist stretching his head out further. Luo Binghe swept his peripheral vision over and saw that Shen Qingqiu's gaze hadn't moved, and instead was staring even more intensely. Black lines came down, his heart stuffy and teeth itching. Essentially meaning, like, you know the vertical lines on a character's face when they're upset in an anime? That's what it's saying. He looks like that. He laughed and talked with Luo Binghe while sneakily moving their horses faster and faster until they were far enough away that Shen Qingqiu could no longer see them without leaning his torso out of the carriage. Shen Qingqiu could only sit back down properly, disappointed. How could he forget, when male and female leads were cooing sweetly at each other, there would never be an obstructive third-wheeling audience. However, this child had truly grown up, wanting to hide his romances from his elders. Could it be his rebellious stage had finally arrived? Oh, I love the little stupid incidents where he just completely misses how Luo Binghe is actually feeling, because he's still in his head thinking of Luo Binghe as the character, not the person he's come to know. He's not the same person he was in the book, you know? He's not gonna fall in love with Luo Binghe. Aw, thank you for the support, Delvin. Thank you. I'm so glad you're enjoying the stream. We are now on to chapter 22. Chapter 22, Immortal Alliance Conference 2. Judy Gorge. Judy Gorge spanned 7 mountain peaks, overflowing with deep green. Scattered discordantly within were bright springs and dark rivers, waterfalls and wondrous stones, deep valleys and soaring mountains. As its name implied, it had a terrain that represented pushed into hopelessness. Yet the next moment you could also see paths winding through the peaks, unable to be extinguished. In Shen Qingqiu's eyes, it was an excellent essential for both adventurers and those going about their daily lives. Alright, so these have some references here. The name is a reference, or it has a meaning. It's like every cloud has a silver lining, basically. Like, it's a very dangerous place, but it's also incredibly beautiful. It's kind of the idea there. Let's go back up here. The new talent participating in the conference followed the arrangement and stood in well-ordered rows, surrounding a gigantic, natural stone platform before the gorge. The 4 great cultivation sects made up the main force of the participants, with Kangshong Mountain in the lead. Following closely behind were Zhaohua Temple, Tianyi Monastery, and Huanhua Palace. Of the 4 sects, Kangshong Mountain was the most comprehensive. The 12 peaks each had their own strengths in multiple fields. Temples and monasteries were naturally the headquarters of those who became Buddhist monks and Taoist priests. Huanhua Palace was more complicated. Their sect followed the teachings of various different schools, had an aptitude for the Taoist art of concealment, and interacted the most with the secular world. The level of their techniques was not clear, but there was one point on which there was no doubt. They were absolutely the richest of the sects. They contributed the most money every conference. Other than them, there were also countless small and medium-sized sects participating. Therefore, the final number of those who'd signed up and gathered at Judy Gorge was definitely over 1,000. What had always been a silent, cold gorge entrance suddenly burst with more than 1,000 people. The animals that had never seen people before were all frightened out. It was unusually lively in all meanings of the word. At the entrance to the gorge, a high dais had long been set up, so that all non-participating cultivators could observe the battles. Various colored flags representing each of the sects fluttered and swayed there. The seats of the sect leaders were all at the highest level. Kangchong Mountain's delegation, led by Chen Yuan, sat down on the dais. Shen Qingqiu sat in the back, next to an elderly man of poised bearing and a head of white hair, who'd greeted their group from Kangchong Mountain earlier, and now also nodded to him. Immortal Master Shen. Huan Hua's old palace master, who was also Luo Binghe's birth mother's master. Shen Qingqiu returned the greeting with the mindset of someone meeting the emperor's relative. Not long after, a member of Huan Hua Palace walked onto the stone platform. After all, they'd contributed the most money. No issue letting them decide the host. This person's martial foundations were deep, his breaths plentiful and long-lasting. Everyone at the entire gorge entrance, including those on the soaring dais, could hear his voice fully. The conference will last for 7 days. After everyone enters the gorge, we will set up a giant barrier and cover the entire Judy Gorge. For 7 days, the participants entering Judy Gorge will be isolated from the outside world on their side, unable to know the situation outside, but the observers will be able to know the situation within via the spirit eagles let loose above the valley. Over 100 types of demonic creatures have already been placed within the valley. The total number is close to 5,000. Every time a creature is taken down, you will receive a prayer bead from its body. With different creatures of different levels, the spiritual chi within this prayer beads will be vastly different. Is everyone wearing a gold cord on their wrist? The people beneath the platform immediately raised their wrists together, revealing the gold cords. It was quite a magnificent sight. The MC continued. When you obtain a bead, thread it onto the cord. Everyone's score will automatically be displayed on the ranking charts outside. The ranking charts were displayed opposite the dais. Although there were as many as 8, everyone's attention was only on the first gold-inscribed tablet's top 100 names, or even only the top 10 names. This embodied the idea of no first place among scholars, no second place among martial artists, which is another phrase. And it means, the explanation is scholars must uphold modesty so they can't claim first place, where martial artists are all about competition, so only first place matters to them. Basically, it's saying they only care about the winners. Understandably. Yeah, this is definitely the tournament chapter of this universe. Alright. Finally, the Huan Ha Palace member stressed in a severe tone. It's forbidden for sects to fight over and snatch each other's beads. The moment we discover those who fight or use underhanded methods to steal the beads of others, we will immediately revoke their rights to participate, and they will be banned from the conference for 3 sessions. 3 sessions, meaning 12 years. This group of new talent was like a mix of dragons and carp. There were many who were young and inexperienced, and there were also quite a few old hands, scoundrels who'd scurried about for many years. If they didn't forbid brawls, they feared the entire conference would become incomparably chaotic, to the point of lives being lost. Therefore, this rule was very necessary. Shen Qingqiu was bored to the point his bones itched. He appeared to be staring intently at the scene beneath him, but his mind had long wandered off. Suddenly from the side, several girls from one of the sect leader's inner circles whispered amongst each other. "Which sect is that disciple from? So incredibly handsome! Those white robes really suit him. He wouldn't lose to Gongyi Shishong. But Gongyi Shishong is not only extraordinary in appearance, he's also of incredible spiritual strength. How can you compare them?" You just can't stand when others put down Gongyi Shishong, can you? Sure enough, you retorted immediately. Admit it. Admit what? Stupid girl, what did you say? I dare you to say it again. A burst of shamed, displeased anger and giggling play-fighting followed. As soon as he heard, Shen Qingqiu knew their subject was the one in the crowd dressed in white, the refined, outstanding Luo Binghe. In truth, they weren't the only ones secretly watching and discussing him. Even among the participating disciples below on the stone platform, many girls stared stealthily at Luo Binghe, jade-like cheeks dusted with blushing red. They kept their voices low, but with the kind of cultivators who were present, their 5 senses were all incredibly sharp. Could any of them not hear? These girls were too young and so weren't careful, letting others hear their private conversations. Fortunately, these seniors were all very considerate and let their sect leader, who was already holding a hand to his forehead and feigning sleep, keep face. Everyone pretended they hadn't heard, gaze averted. Trying to break the awkwardness, someone coughed twice and said with a smile, we fellow cultivators are from various former sessions. Why don't we also put down our predictions? Which of the conference's new talent will stand out the most? Shen Qingqiu's spirits rose. The words had been put down predictions, but they weren't actually talking about divining fortunes. They were talking about gambling. To say it straight, it was about laying a bet on talent you had your eyes on. Cultivators needed some entertainment after all. Also, the stakes used for gambling weren't tacky monetary things like gold and silver, but artifacts, spirit stones, or even the names of disciples who would be sent to study under the other sects. They also wouldn't bet anything of vital importance, but this also counted as one of the Immortal Alliance Conference's traditional entertainment programs. Those as dignified as a first-class sect leader like Yu Qingyuan would be conscious of their status and wouldn't play around with things like this, but naturally there were people willing to join in the fun. A short moment later, the dais was roaring with enthusiasm, laying down dozens of bets. Quite a few bet on their own disciples. For example, Qingqiu bet on Liu Mingyan's victory. Shen Qingqiu didn't even need to think, and straight away bet 5,000 spirit stones on Luo Binghe. Such a daring move stirred quite a ripple. Even Yu Qingyuan paused in his polite exchange of greetings with an abbot from Zhaohua Temple, his gaze shifting over. Shen Qingqiu saw the way he seemed about to speak but didn't, and said, "Zengmen Shishong, this is just for fun, to encourage Binghe a little." Liu Qingge sneered. "Just for fun. If you emptied your Qingjing Peak, would there even be 1,000 spirit stones?" Shen Qingqiu clammed up. "Indeed, there wouldn't. When placing a bet here, just writing it down was sufficient. The accounts were settled afterwards, and they didn't need proof of funds. Because everyone was of name and reputation, there was no fear of debts being blown off. He'd known inside himself this was a sure win, and so had raised the stakes. After all, the others didn't know how much assets he possessed. Oh, my poor boy, you're being a little bit dumb. But of course, he knows his boy's a definite win. Don't do this at home, folks. Yu Qingyuan was probably afraid of them embarrassing themselves before outsiders and rushed to smooth things. "All right, lower your voices. Of course there would." Qingqiu butted in, getting right to the point. "Zengmen Shishong, you're providing?" Yu Qingyuan said, "I am." Liu Qingge asked, "Who would the loss be on?" Yu Qingyuan said, "Me." Shen Qingqiu said, "But who would the winnings go to?" Yu Qingyuan said, "You." An agreement was reached, and everyone other than Liu Qingge rejoiced. Shen Qingqiu happily went to lay his bet down. So we're seeing more signs of the fact that Yu Qingyuan is very indulgent with Shen Qingqiu, and lets him get away with a lot of things, and we'll learn more about why later. All the cultivators quietly wondered why they'd never heard of Luo Binghe's name. You couldn't really blame them. The current Luo Binghe style of doing things was more low-key and modest, unwilling to claim credit. Every time he did a good deed or completed a task, he would quietly leave. This prevented his reputation from growing, so his skills and talents never shone. Outsiders didn't know the reason and assumed Shen Qingqiu was doing exactly as he'd said, just making a good omen to encourage his disciple. And below the dais, after the talents took their oath together, they formally entered the venue. The numbers were high, so 12 different entrances had been set, dividing up the sects and having them enter in groups. The participating talents, shaking with nerves, stepped into the area making up Judi Valley, and began their expeditions. On the dais, members of the older generations who'd long achieved success had finished their rounds of betting, and sat with unruffled composure. Some of them were even exchanging pointers, chatting, or chewing on melon seeds. Within the venue were more than 100 specially controlled spirit eagles. The silver rings around their talons were inlaid with special crystals. As they soared, a panoramic view of the people and scenery below was projected onto the dais' numerous crystal mirrors, the effect similar to surveillance equipment. Someone smiled from ear to ear. As expected, Gongji Zhao is the first right after entering the venue. On the golden scribe tablets, the first 10 names all shone with bright light. At this time, the first place had changed to a golden bright Gongyi Zhao. Right after it was the number 12. That is to say, within a short hour after entering the venue, he'd already eliminated 12 demonic creatures and obtained 12 prayer beads. Even Liu Mingyan, close behind in second, had only obtained 6 prayer beads, a large gap of double the number it opened up. On a crystal mirror, a youth dressed in white was reflected, figure elegant and unrestrained like drifting clouds and flowing water. Yet his actions were as quick as lightning. Within an instant, he'd torn a shrill screaming banshee into scattered smoke. Listening to the unceasing excessive praises by his ear, Shen Qingqiu smiled without speaking. This Gongji Zhao, although he looked favored and blessed, overflowing with incredible presence, in actuality, he was only half a dollar better than his fellow cannon fodder, that's all. He was the typical kind of character who looked handsome, was of good birth, good talent, loved by girls, full of mettle and accomplished in her youth, but unfortunately, there was the protagonist, so they were absolutely cannon fodder. Though he had the most bets for top ranker, sorry to say, he wouldn't be first for long before Luo Binghe kicked him off. Luo Binghe's name was currently in the middle, the number after it was only a 1. Yet Shen Qingqiu wasn't worried at all. He knew that once tonight arrived, once the curtains lifted on that breathtaking, climactic disturbance, Luo Binghe's name would soar unstoppingly up the ranks. The first day of the Immortal Alliance Conference approached midnight. A round golden moon hung high in the sky, the dais bright under the lamplights. Among the many crystal mirrors, Shen Qingqiu finally found one displaying Luo Binghe's current situation. Currently, Luo Binghe was slowly moving through the forest, spotlessly clean and without a trace of exhaustion. His eyes were like stars, and seemed as if they could see right through the crystal mirror. However, he wasn't alone. Most of the participants moved alone, with too many people teaming up together to fight monsters. How could they divvy up the beads? Or they would only cooperate with those they were more familiar with, forming teams of at most 2 or 3 Shishongs and Shidis. Of course, there were also incredible female cultivators, but looking at them as a group, their strength and mental fortitude was lacking, often requiring others to help them. Their team was mainly composed of Shimeis and Shijis they got along well with and spent their time playing instead of working properly, and basically looked quite hopeless. This poor book is so mean to female cultivators. I guess it kind of feels like she's poking fun at teenage girls. But why can't these teenage girls be badasses like the teenage boys are? Come on. Yet following after Luo Binghe was 7 or 8 others, and all of them were either delicate girls or young disciples. The situation drew a lot of attention. Immediately, some stopped watching even Gongyi Zhao's heroic figure, switching over to size up this bloated team, finding it strange. Amongst them, the one walking closest to Luo Binghe was a Huanhua disciple in light yellow robes, holding a night pearl and lighting their way. Alright, we're gonna stop there. Today we're only doing 2 because I've had quite a busy morning trying to fix a bunch of different things and test out some things. I think this has gone pretty well. I have a few things I think I'll change, but I think it'll be more interesting than just staring at a close-up of my face. What do y'all think? You know? I have more things to set up for the next couple days, but that's it for now. Thanks for listening. I'll be back tomorrow with a Thanksgiving stream. We'll just be playing games all day and hanging out. If you don't have anything to do, come hang. Check the description for links to social media and my shop and all that jazz. Support the channel if you like what I do and you want bonus content for it, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that's it, other than just working on behind-the-scenes stuff, you know. Not a lot of changes. You'll see new sets coming soon. Thanks again, everyone, and thanks to all our members like Nkalime and Delvin, and Jeff, and all y'all folks. You're great. I love ya. And I will see y'all later for something. A video game at some point. Bye.